The hitchhiker that almost murdered me. It was a hot summer day. I had gone for a hike and got seriously lost, which is another story. Suffice it to say that I had hiked through trackless wilderness for mile after mile, and even when I found a road, I was so far from a car I didn't know which direction to go, dead tired, exhausted, and still several miles back to the car. Finally, I was on the way home late afternoon on a hot, sunny summer day after many hours lost in mountains and woods. It was about 15 miles to home, and I live out in the country. As I started into the drive, I saw an overweight, out of shape fellow hitchhiking in the direction I was going. I saw that he had a long, hard walk in front of him, just like I had just completed only 20 minutes ago. Of course, I felt sorry for the fella having a similar ordeal as I just had, and so I stopped and motioned for him to get in. I did not realize my ordeals for the day were not yet over. As he opened the door, he gave me a look and we exchanged a greeting as he squeezed into the front seat. He was going to a spot on the highway, way to my house, and away we went, engaging in light conversation. I glanced down at his side. I noticed he had a prosthetic arm made of a hard, heavy ballistic plastic with a metal hook for grasping instead of a hand. From the conversation, he was an out-of-work construction heavy equipment operator whose house was undergoing a bank foreclosure. He was basically squatting illegally on his own property, probably hitching around during the day to avoid the sheriff evicting him and coming back in the evening to let himself into his basement. So, basically a homeless vagrant and a transient that still had a physical address. This didn't raise any red flags with me at the time, though. Maybe it should have. I have a repertoire of interesting stories I like tell. I dusted one off and told him a yarn or two to pass the miles and be friendly as it makes the ride easier. He listened politely, and I found he liked to talk a little bit himself. My tales must have encouraged him because he began to tell me a very strange tale of his own. He began to relate to me that years ago, during what he claimed was one of the worst blizzards of the century, in his words, a woman had a bad accident on the U.S. route that went past his house. He said that she was badly injured from the accident and bleeding to death. His story continued, and he mentioned that the weather was so bad that the road was undrivable. But as a construction operator, he had a backhoe. He said that he loaded the injured woman into the bucket of the backhoe and drove her 30 miles through the freezing cold and blizzard to a major medical center and delivered her to the ER. That was a pretty odd tale, I thought. I am pretty street smart, having seen a lot of the world and some of the more dangerous places in it. I believe that he had changed up the story somewhat to protect the guilty. He wanted to share his story, but disguise his role or what had really happened. In other words, his story contained a kernel of truth, but he had changed a few details. I am quick to spot inconsistencies and also can analyze just as quickly. It comes with the street smarts, another word for the survival instinct. What I think is true was that a woman who was fatally injured, perhaps someone who had come to his door for help, I think that she died, and I think he used the bucket loader to bury the body. The why and wherefore I could not guess at, but I had immediately gotten that impression. I did not have much time to think about it as the drive was coming to an end. It may seem weird to you that I came to that conclusion, but perhaps what follows will convince you. As he ended his story, we had come to the turn for his house. As I turned into the long driveway, he had just ended his story and now began to make improper propositions to me as to what he would like to have happen, amorously. I was a bit taken aback, but just simply told him politely that that was not my thing, and ended my conversation as we pulled up to his house, and he continued to insist. The problem was that he was not taking no as an answer. I realized things were rapidly getting out of hand, but I am a cool customer when dealing with actual stress and danger. I'm pretty hardcore, which discourages most potential malefactors, but not this guy, which shows just how dangerous he was. He wasn't getting out of the car now that we were stopped, and he had his hard plastic arm, solid and heavy as a log, raised halfway between us, looking me straight in the eye and not saying anything. Having studied self-defense, I knew the deal. If I looked away or blinked, he would knock me out with the arm. He was formidable as well. He may have been fat, but he was a construction worker with large arms and muscles from a life of heavy work. The weight was all to his advantage in any struggle. I knew the deal, though, and I always had a plan in case a hitchhiker proved to be dangerous. I had my seatbelt on, and he didn't. The plan was to floor the car into his house at about 60 and put him through the windshield. Even if I was injured or unconscious myself, hopefully he would be worse. The idea was that the noise of a high-speed crash would bring neighbors to find out what happened, and I would also blare the horn. But I could see that if he went through the trouble on knocking me out for the purpose of a rape, that likely I would never wake up again. Someone this dangerous was not going to leave a witness that could put him in jail for the rest of his life. Likely he was a career criminal, and this was not his first rodeo. The other secret, learned from martial arts, is never look away and hold the gaze. Read the intent and the spontaneously block or deflect the initial attack. This guy could see from my eyes that he would have a real fight on his hands and that I was fully ready for a life or death combat. The situation ended when he opened the door and, anticlimactically, got out. I quickly backed out of the dooryard and spun the car around, giving him a departing glance, and headed out. Whew, I thought, that is the most dangerous motherfucker that I have ever encountered. I really should call the state police and tell them to keep an eye on that scary bitch, because it will only be a matter of time before he tries to kill somebody, and at least they will have a warning about him on their files. But, I thought, the police often don't seem to take me seriously, and he didn't do anything other than pose a threat. No actual assault. What can I do? The real reason was now that the situation was over, I just wanted to forget about it. It has been a very long day, after all. A police report would take up another hour of my dinner time, and I would have to deal with possibly skeptical or unhelpful authorities. In 2020 retrospect, I see now that that was a mistake. About 10 years later, the property was the site of a very active crime scene. A woman from a nearby state had come to live at that house and had gone missing. I did not realize that his house was the site till I drove by one day and saw a state police crime scene bus, about 5 cruisers and a police helicopter, and everything marked off with crime scene tape. And then I thought, oh my, I really should have let someone know. It might have prevented this. And I was lazy and concerned more with myself that day. The girl's body was later found in a local pond in a freezer that had come from that house. Dark stories of a couple exploiting a young homeless girl down on her luck emerged, and it seems other folks were involved as well. A sordid tale I won't go into here out of respect, in case her family were to read this post. I drove by a couple days later and the investigation was winding down, and only a cruiser or two were maintaining security. That is when I decided to call into the state police with the story about the backhoe that Captain Hook had told me. The next day, the crime scene was abuzz again. I suspect they were searching for other cadavers. Although the couple was never charged, they both remain in prison on other charges. The last I knew, the lesson for me was see something, say something. Oh, and hitchhikers these days are getting too damn sketchy.